Recently uncovered journals and testimonies have brought to light a series of inexplicable events that occurred at Blackmoor Estate between 1887 and 1889. What follows is an account pieced together from these documents and local records. The winter of 1887 arrived with unusual ferocity in the remote Yorkshire moors. Snow fell in thick, suffocating blankets, isolating the already secluded Blackmoor estate from the nearest village of Thornwick, some 5 miles distant. The estate stood like a brooding sentinel atop a rocky promontory, its Gothic spires and weathered stone appearing almost to pierce the perpetually grey sky. It was a place that seemed to exist in deliberate defiance of comfort or welcome, much like its owners, the Ellsworth family. Blackmoor had belonged to the Ellsworths for 6 generations, though their wealth had originated in the Caribbean sugar plantations before the family relocated to England in the late 18th century. By 1887, the family fortune had dwindled considerably, leaving the current patriarch, Augustus Ellsworth, with little more than the imposing estate, his family name, and a desperate need to maintain appearances at all costs. Augustus was a tall, gaunt man with sharp features that seemed perpetually displeased. His wife, Vivienne, once renowned for her beauty in London society, had retreated into a strange, quiet melancholy following the birth of their twin daughters, 11 years prior. The twins, Evelyn and Eleanor, were pale, solemn children with identical raven-black hair and unsettlingly perceptive blue eyes. They rarely spoke to anyone outside the family and were educated at home by a series of tutors, none of whom stayed longer than a season. The most curious aspect of Blackmoor Estate, however, was not the family itself, but the alarming rate at which domestic staff seemed to vanish. Over the preceding 5 years, no fewer than 7 young women employed as maids had disappeared without explanation. The official account, as provided by Augustus to the reluctant local constable, was always the same. The girl had left without notice, likely lured away by better prospects in Manchester or London. The lower classes have no sense of obligation, Augustus was known to complain to his few remaining acquaintances. They come and go like the wind, with no regard for their betters. The constable, a practical man named James Harrow, who had served the district for 15 years, found these explanations increasingly difficult to accept. Yet with no evidence of foul play and no bodies ever discovered, there was little he could do beyond making notations in his logbook, which now sat buried beneath more pressing matters in the cramped village constabulary. This, then, was the situation when Iris Fleming arrived at Blackmoor Estate on the 15th of January, 1887. The 22-year-old daughter of a recently deceased clergyman, Iris had travelled from London with impeccable references and a desperate need for employment. Her father's death had left her with no family and no means of support, save the education and refinement he had provided her. "You come highly recommended, Miss Fleming," Augustus said coldly as she stood in the cavernous entrance hall, her modest travelling case at her feet. The interior of Blackmoor was as austere as its exterior, all dark wood, faded tapestries, and windows that seemed reluctant to admit the watery winter light. "I trust you understand that we expect absolute discretion and loyalty from our staff." "Yes, sir," Iris replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "My father taught me the value of both." Something in her demeanour, perhaps her quiet dignity or the intelligence evident in her grey eyes, seemed to give Augustus pause. After a moment he nodded curtly. "Mrs. Bramwell will show you to your quarters and explain your duties," he said, referring to the housekeeper, a severe woman in her 50s, who had materialized silently beside him. "You will attend my wife and daughters primarily. The twins require special consideration." As Iris followed Mrs. Bramwell up the creaking servants' staircase, she could not help but notice the old woman's tense posture and the way her eyes darted nervously about. "Has something upset you, Mrs. Bramwell?" Iris ventured. The housekeeper paused on the landing, turning to regard Iris with an expression that hovered between warning and pity. "Listen carefully, girl," she whispered, her voice barely audible. This house has rules beyond those the master will tell you. Never enter the north wing after sunset. Never respond if you hear someone calling your name through the walls. And most importantly, never, ever indulge the twins when they speak of their friends who visit at night. She gripped Iris's arm with surprising strength. Do you understand me? Before Iris could respond, a soft voice echoed from the hallway above. Mrs. Bramwell, is that the new maid? At the top of the stairs stood the twins, identical in every way, from their matching black dresses to the ribbon in their hair. They regarded Iris with identical expressions of curious intensity. Yes, Miss Evelyn, Miss Eleanor, Mrs. Bramwell replied, her earlier tension masked beneath a veneer of propriety. This is Miss Fleming. She'll be attending to you and your mother from today. The girls descended the stairs with an eerie synchronicity, their movements perfectly mirrored. When they reached Iris, they circled her slowly, as if examining a specimen. She has kind eyes. One of them, Iris couldn't tell which, observed. But sad ones, the other added. She's lost someone. Recently. Iris felt a chill travel down her spine. My father passed away last month, she said, struggling to maintain her composure. The twins exchanged a look that seemed to contain an entire conversation. He's still with you, the first twin said matter-of-factly. He stands behind your left shoulder when you're afraid, the second continued. Mrs. Bramwell cleared her throat loudly. That's quite enough, young ladies. Your mother is expecting you for your reading hour. With one last penetrating look at Iris, the twins turned and ascended the stairs, their footsteps making no sound on the worn carpet. Don't mind them, Mrs. Bramwell muttered, though her expression belied her words. They say all manner of nonsense to new staff. It's just their way. Iris's room was a small, sparse chamber in the servants' quarters, containing nothing more than a narrow bed, a washstand, and a battered chest of drawers. The single window overlooked the bleak moor, now obscured by thickly falling snow. As Mrs. Bramwell explained her duties, attending to Mrs. Ellsworth's toilette, helping with the twins' education, mending and laundry, Iris found her attention drawn to a curious detail. A small series of scratches on the inside of the door, as if someone had been counting days. That night, after a silent, uncomfortable dinner in the servants' hall with the taciturn cook, the aging butler, and two sullen groundskeepers, Iris lay awake in her bed, listening to the wind howl around the eaves of the house. The mattress was thin and lumpy, the blankets inadequate against the pervasive chill. Just as she was finally drifting toward sleep, a soft sound penetrated her consciousness, the muffled creak of floorboards outside her door. Iris sat up, straining her ears. The sound came again, followed by what seemed to be whispered conversation. Gathering her courage, she slipped from the bed, wincing as her bare feet touched the icy floor, and moved to the door. She pressed her ear against the wood, but could discern nothing intelligible. After a moment's hesitation, she turned the handle and pulled the door open a crack. The corridor was empty, illuminated only by the pale moonlight filtering through a window at the far end. Iris was about to close the door when she noticed something on the floor, a small folded piece of paper. She picked it up and returned to bed, lighting the stub of candle on her nightstand. The note was written in a childish hand, the letters uneven but determined. Miss Fleming, we know why you're here. We know about the others too. If you want to stay alive, meet us in the library at midnight tomorrow. E&E Iris stared at the note, her heart pounding. The others. Did they mean the previous maids who had vanished? And how could children of 11 know anything about such matters? She considered bringing the note to Mrs. Bramwell, but remembered the housekeeper's warning about the twins and their stories. Perhaps this was simply an elaborate prank, the kind of mischief bored, isolated children might devise to frighten new staff. The following day passed in a whirlwind of new routines and introductions. Iris met Mrs. Ellsworth, a fragile-looking woman who spent most of her time in a darkened room, taking laudanum for what Augustus vaguely described as women's troubles. She barely acknowledged Iris's presence, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the window. The twins, however, were a different matter entirely. During their lessons, which Iris was instructed to oversee, they were perfectly behaved and unsettlingly intelligent. They completed complex mathematical equations with ease, recited lengthy passages of Shakespeare from memory, and demonstrated a knowledge of Latin that exceeded Iris's own education. Yet throughout the day, Iris caught them watching her with that same penetrating stare, communicating with each other through subtle glances and gestures. Occasionally, one would whisper something to the other, followed by hushed giggles that made Iris's skin prickle. As midnight approached, Iris debated whether to honor the twins' request. Common sense told her to ignore the note. What good could come of meeting children in secret in the middle of the night? And yet, something in their manner, in the certainty with which they had spoken of her father, compelled her to learn more. At 11:45, Iris donned her dressing gown and slippers and made her way silently through the darkened house toward the library. The moonlight cast strange, elongated shadows across the hallways, and more than once, Iris thought she heard footsteps echoing her own, only to find no one there when she turned. The library door was ajar, a faint glow of candlelight spilling into the corridor. Iris hesitated, then pushed it open wider. The room was vast, lined with bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling, accessible by a wrought iron spiral staircase in one corner. A massive oak desk dominated the center, and before it sat the twins, side by side in matching nightgowns, their faces eerily illuminated by a single candle. "You came." One of them, Eleanor, Iris thought, observed. "We weren't certain you would," Evelyn added. Iris closed the door quietly behind her. "Your note was concerning," she said, trying to project an authority she didn't feel. "What did you mean about the others?" The twins exchanged their characteristic look. "Sit down, Miss Fleming," Eleanor said, gesturing to a chair opposite them. "We have much to tell you, and the night is already half gone." Iris complied, her apprehension growing. "Do you believe in ghosts, Miss Fleming?" Evelyn asked abruptly. The question caught Iris off guard. I'm not certain," she admitted. "My father was a clergyman. He believed in the soul's journey after death, but not in spirits lingering on earth." "Your father was wrong," Eleanor stated with the absolute conviction only a child could muster. "This house is full of them. 7 to be exact," Evelyn continued, "all young women, all frightened, all betrayed." Iris felt her blood run cold. "The missing maids," she whispered. The twins nodded in unison. "They try to speak to us," Eleanor said. "Most people can't hear them, but we can. We always could." "The last one, Jane. She was kind to us." Evelyn's voice wavered slightly. "She used to bring us sweets from the village and read to us when Mother was indisposed. Father said she ran away to Manchester, but that's a lie." "How do you know?" Iris asked, her throat dry. "Because she told us she wouldn't leave without saying goodbye," Eleanor replied. "And because we can still hear her crying in the north wing." A heavy silence fell over the library, broken only by the occasional crackle of the candle flame. "What happened to Jane?" Iris finally asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. "The same thing that happened to all of them," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The same thing that will happen to you if you don't help us." "Father needs money," Eleanor explained with an adult's practicality that was disturbing in a child so young. "The estate is failing. The investments have dried up. But he found another way," Evelyn continued. "There are men who pay handsomely for certain services." Iris frowned, not comprehending. "What services?" "Young women," Eleanor said bluntly. "Specifically young women with no family, no connections, women who won't be missed." "That's why he hired you," Evelyn added. "You're perfect. No parents, no siblings, no one to ask questions when you disappear." Iris shook her head, unwilling to accept what the twins were suggesting. "This is absurd. Your father may be stern, but he's a gentleman. He wouldn't—" "Check the ledger in his desk," Eleanor interrupted, pointing to a drawer in the massive oak desk. "Third drawer on the right. The key is behind the copy of Paradise Lost on the second shelf." Driven by a mixture of disbelief and growing dread, Iris rose and moved to the bookshelf, finding the volume exactly where Eleanor had indicated. Behind it was a small brass key. With trembling hands, she unlocked the drawer and withdrew a leather-bound ledger. The pages contained columns of figures and cryptic notations, most of which meant nothing to Iris. But as she turned the pages, she found entries that made her blood freeze. April 12, 1884, M. Sullivan, 75 on November 3, 1884, C. Bennett, 80 on June 17, 1885, A. Wilson, 85, January 22, 1886, R. Murphy, 90, August 5, 1886, F. Thompson, 90 December 4, 1886, J. Collins, 100. Each name corresponded with a maid who had supposedly left Blackmoor estate without notice. And beside each name was another entry, a date, a set of initials, and a substantial sum of money. "These are payments," Iris whispered, horrified. "He's selling them." "Not selling," came a deep voice from the doorway. "Merely providing a service for gentlemen with particular tastes." Iris whirled around to find Augustus Ellsworth standing in the doorway, a hunting rifle cradled in his arms. His face was a mask of cold fury. "I had such hopes for you, Miss Fleming," he said, stepping into the library and closing the door behind him. "You showed such intelligence, such refinement. You would have fetched a premium price." Iris backed away, the ledger clutched to her chest like a shield. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice shaking. "People will look for me." Augustus laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "Who? Your father is dead. You have no family, no connections. That's why you were perfect." His gaze shifted to the twins, his expression hardening. "As for you two, I should have known you'd cause trouble. Always whispering, always watching. Your mother was right. There's something unnatural about you." "We hear them, Father," Evelyn said, her voice surprisingly steady. "All of them. They're very angry." "And they're getting stronger," Eleanor added. Augustus scoffed. "Enough of your nonsense. Miss Fleming, you will come with me now. My associate is already waiting, and he's paid a handsome sum for your company." "No," Iris said, surprising herself with her defiance. "I won't." Augustus raised the rifle, pointing it directly at her. "You have no choice." At that moment, the candle on the desk flickered violently, then extinguished, plunging the library into darkness. A cold wind seemed to sweep through the room, though no windows were open. And then, in the silence that followed, came a sound that chilled Iris to her core. Whispers, dozens of them, overlapping and growing louder by the second. "They're here," the twins said in perfect unison. This first block introduces the setting, Blackmoor estate in remote Yorkshire. The main characters, Iris Fleming, Augustus Ellsworth, the twins Evelyn and Eleanor, and Mrs. Bramwell, and establishes the central mystery of the disappearing maids. I've built tension through the twins' supernatural abilities and the revelation of Augustus's sinister scheme. The narrative ends at a critical moment as the spirits of the previous victims appear to manifest. In the pitch darkness of the library, Iris stood frozen, the ledger still clutched to her chest. The whispers grew in volume and clarity, individual voices becoming distinguishable within the cacophony. "He took me to the cellar. I tried to run. Don't trust him. Help us." Augustus fumbled for matches in his pocket, his earlier confidence visibly shaken. "Silence," he shouted into the darkness. "This is my house. You will obey me." When he finally managed to light a lamp, the scene before him had changed dramatically. The twins stood on either side of Iris now, each holding one of her hands. Their expressions were serene, almost vacant, as if they were listening to a distant melody only they could hear. "What is the meaning of this?" Augustus demanded, his voice betraying a tremor of fear beneath the anger. "Girls, come here at once." Neither twin moved. Instead, Eleanor spoke in a voice that seemed oddly mature for her 11 years. "We've decided, Father. No more girls will disappear from Blackmoor." "It ends tonight," Evelyn continued, her tone a perfect mirror of her sister's. Augustus raised the rifle again, his knuckles white around the barrel. "I won't be threatened in my own home, especially not by my own children. Step away from Miss Fleming immediately or I'll—" "You'll what?" came a new voice from the doorway, a woman's voice, cultured but with an edge of steel. Vivian Ellsworth stood there, looking more alert and present than Iris had seen her since arriving at Blackmoor. In her hand was a small revolver, pointed directly at her husband. "Vivian," Augustus said, his tone shifting to one of practiced concern. "You should be resting, my dear. You know how your nerves trouble you." "My nerves are perfectly fine, Augustus," Vivian interrupted coldly. "It's my conscience that has been troubling me." She moved into the room, the revolver steady in her grip. "I've known for some time what you've been doing. The laudanum you so generously provided kept me docile, but not unaware." Augustus's face contorted with rage. "You dare to threaten me? After all I've done for you, I saved you from poverty when your family lost everything. I gave you a home, a position in society." "You gave me a prison," Vivian countered, her voice rising, "and you've turned it into a place of unspeakable evil." She glanced at the twins, her expression softening momentarily. "My daughters tried to tell me, but I wouldn't listen. I couldn't bear to believe that the man I married could be capable of such depravity." "The man you married was weak," Augustus spat. "He would have let this estate crumble, would have seen us all reduced to common laborers. I did what was necessary to maintain our position, our legacy. By selling innocent women to monsters like yourself?" Vivian's hand trembled slightly, but her aim remained true. "No fortune is worth that price." As the confrontation between husband and wife escalated, Iris felt a tugging at her sleeve. The twins were pulling her toward the door, their movements once again synchronized with uncanny precision. "We must go," Eleanor whispered. "Now, while Father is distracted." "The others are waiting," Evelyn added cryptically, hesitating only briefly. Iris allowed herself to be led from the library, the sound of Augustus and Vivian's raised voices fading behind them. The twins guided her through the darkened corridors of Blackmoor, their steps sure despite the near-total darkness. They seemed to be heading toward the north wing, the very area Mrs. Bramwell had warned her against entering after sunset. "Where are you taking me?" Iris asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "To the truth," Eleanor replied simply. "They want you to see," Evelyn explained, though her explanation clarified nothing. The north wing of Blackmoor was noticeably colder than the rest of the house, the air heavy with a damp, musty scent that spoke of neglect and abandonment. As they walked, Iris noticed other changes. The wallpaper here was faded and peeling, the carpet worn through in places, exposing the bare floorboards beneath. It was as if this part of the house had been deliberately left to decay. Finally, the twins stopped before a heavy oak door at the end of a long corridor. A large iron key protruded from the lock. "They're in here," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "All of them," Evelyn confirmed. Iris's heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct told her to turn and run, to flee Blackmoor and its terrible secrets. And yet something stronger compelled her forward, a sense of obligation to the women who had come before her, to the truth that lay hidden behind that imposing door. With a deep breath, she stepped forward and turned the key. The lock released with a heavy click, and the door swung inward on protesting hinges. The room beyond was large but sparsely furnished, a dusty four-poster bed, a wardrobe, a writing desk, and little else. What drew Iris's attention, however, were the walls. Every inch of available space was covered in writing, names, dates, fragmentary sentences that seemed to have been scratched into the plaster with desperate urgency. Mary Sullivan, taken April 15th, 1884. Catherine Bennett, taken November 6th, 1884. Anne Wilson, taken June 20th, 1885. The list continued, corresponding precisely with the entries in Augustus's ledger. Beneath each name was a jumble of text: pleas for help, descriptions of abuse, messages to loved ones who would never receive them. It was a record of suffering, a testament to lives cut short by cruelty and greed. "This was their room," Eleanor explained, her voice hushed with respect. "Father kept them here before the men came to take them away. They scratched their stories into the walls while they waited," Evelyn added. "They wanted someone to know what happened to them." Iris moved closer to the wall, tracing her fingers over the etched words. "Why didn't anyone help them?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Mrs. Bramwell knew," Eleanor said, a note of accusation in her voice. "So did Mother, though she pretended not to." "The laudanum helped her pretend," Evelyn clarified, "until we stopped replacing it with water last week." Iris turned to them in surprise. "You've been diluting your mother's medicine?" The twins nodded in unison. "We needed her to wake up," Eleanor explained. "To see what Father was doing," Evelyn continued, "to stop him before you became the next name on the wall." They finished together. A sound from the doorway made all three of them turn. "Mrs. Bramwell stood there, a lamp in her trembling hand, her face ashen. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice brittle with fear. "None of you should be here. The master will be furious." "Did you know?" Iris demanded, anger suddenly flaring through her grief. "Did you know what he was doing to these women?" Mrs. Bramwell's shoulders sagged, aging her a decade in an instant. "Not at first," she admitted. "I believed him when he said the first girl had run off, even the second. But then there was Catherine. She was such a good girl, so devoted to her mother back in Leeds. She would never have left without sending word. And yet you said nothing," Iris accused. "You let it continue." "What would you have had me do?" Mrs. Bramwell cried, her composure cracking. "Go to the constable. With what proof? Mr. Ellsworth is a gentleman respected in the county despite his financial troubles. Who would believe the word of an aging housekeeper against his?" "You could have warned them," Iris said, gesturing to the wall of names. "You could have warned me." "I tried," Mrs. Bramwell insisted. "In my way. I told you about the north wing, about not answering voices in the walls. I thought perhaps you'd be sensible enough to leave before—" Her voice trailed off. "Before Father could sell me too." Iris finished for her. A gunshot echoed through the house, the sound reverberating down the long corridors. The twins flinched in perfect synchronicity but showed no other reaction. Mrs. Bramwell gasped, nearly dropping her lamp. "Mother," Eleanor said calmly. "She promised she would end it," Evelyn added. Iris looked at the children in horror. "What do you mean? What has she done?" "What needed to be done," the twins replied together, their voices eerily matter-of-fact. Footsteps approached rapidly from the direction of the main house. Moments later, Vivian appeared, the revolver still in her hand. Her face was pale but composed, her eyes clearer and more focused than Iris had yet seen them. "It's over," she announced without preamble. "Augustus will never harm another woman." Mrs. Bramwell staggered back against the wall, a hand pressed to her mouth. "Madam, what have you done?" "What you should have done years ago, Mrs. Bramwell," Vivian replied sharply. "What I should have done when I first suspected what was happening in my own home." She turned to Iris, her expression softening slightly. "You must leave Blackmoor immediately, Miss Fleming. Take the twins with you to the village. Alert Constable Harrow. Tell him everything. And you, madam." Iris asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "I will remain here," Vivian said with quiet dignity. "I was complicit in my silence, in my willful blindness." "I must answer for that. What about father?" Eleanor asked, displaying the first hint of childish vulnerability Iris had seen in her. "Your father is beyond suffering now," Vivian replied, kneeling to embrace her daughters. "Remember him as he once was, before the estate began to fail, before desperation turned him into something monstrous." Evelyn pulled away slightly, her expression troubled. "But what about the others? They're still here, Mother. They're still angry." "They need peace," Eleanor added. "They need justice." Vivian looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the wall of names. "They shall have both," she promised. "But first you must go with Miss Fleming. It isn't safe for you here." As if in response to her words, a cold draught swept through the room, extinguishing Mrs. Bramwell's lamp. In the sudden darkness, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. "Justice. Make him pay. Not enough. Blood for blood." Vivian stood, pushing the twins toward Iris. "Go now," she urged, her voice tight with fear. "Take the back stairs and head directly to the village. Don't look back, no matter what you hear." Iris gathered the twins close, her instinct to protect them overriding her own terror. "Come, Mrs. Bramwell," she called to the housekeeper, who stood frozen against the wall. "We must all leave this place." But Mrs. Bramwell shook her head, tears streaming down her lined face. "No, miss. I belong here with the mistress. I have my own accounting to face." Outside, the wind had risen to a howl, driving the snow horizontally across the moors. Iris and the twins struggled through the blizzard, following a narrow path that the children assured her led to Thornwick village. Behind them, Blackmoor estate loomed black against the night sky, a single light burning in the north wing window, Vivian's silent vigil. They had travelled perhaps half a mile when a sound rose above the wind, a woman's scream, cut suddenly short. The twins stopped in unison, turning to look back at the house. "Mother," Eleanor whispered. "She's with them now," Evelyn said, her voice strangely calm. Before Iris could respond, a flickering orange glow appeared in the windows of Blackmoor's north wing. Within moments it had spread, flames leaping from window to window with unnatural speed. "Fire," Iris gasped. "We must go back. Your mother, Mrs. Bramwell. It's too late," the twins said together, their voices blending into one. This is what they wanted. This is justice. As they watched, the fire consumed Blackmoor with a ferocity that defied the snowstorm. The flames seemed to dance with purpose, with intent, as if guided by unseen hands. And above the roar of the conflagration, Iris could have sworn she heard women's voices raised in a terrible harmony, not of pain, but of release. By the time they reached Thornwick and raised the alarm, Blackmoor estate was beyond saving. Constable Harrow organized a rescue party, but the blizzard and the intensity of the fire made approach impossible. By morning, all that remained was a blackened shell, still smoldering despite the continuing snow. In the days that followed, as Iris gave her statement to increasingly skeptical authorities from York, a gruesome discovery was made in the ruins. Beneath the kitchen floor of Blackmoor, in what appeared to be a hidden cellar, accessible only through a concealed trapdoor, workers found human remains, not one body, but several, charred beyond recognition, but unmistakably female. 7 women, Constable Harrow reported grimly to Iris, as she sat with the twins in the village's small inn, all buried beneath the house, just as you said. "And Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth?" Iris asked, though she already knew the answer. "No sign yet," Harrow replied, "though given the state of the house we may never recover their bodies." He glanced at the twins who sat quietly by the fire, their expressions unreadable. Poor little mites, to lose both parents in such circumstances. "They're stronger than they appear," Iris said. watching as the twins whispered to each other, occasional smiles flickering across their identical faces. They'll survive this. Harrow nodded, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. There's something else, Miss Fleming, something I haven't shared with my superiors yet. He withdrew a charred fragment of paper from his pocket. We found this in what remained of Mr. Ellsworth's study. It appears to be part of a ledger. Iris took the blackened paper with trembling fingers. Though most of it was illegible, one entry remained clear enough to read, January 20th, 1887, I. Fleming, 150. He had already arranged my sale. Iris whispered, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Before I even arrived at Blackmoor. Harrow nodded grimly. There are initials beside the entry, LM. Does that mean anything to you? Iris shook her head, then paused, a memory surfacing. Wait. On my journey from London, a gentleman introduced himself to me at the coaching inn in Leeds. He said he was a friend of Augustus Ellsworth. His name was Montague. Lord Montague. Harrow's expression darkened. A lord, you say? That complicates matters considerably. So, will you pursue it? Iris asked, already suspecting the answer. The constable sighed heavily. I'll file my report, Miss Fleming, including everything you've told me. But I've been in this position long enough to know how these things work. When men of wealth and title are involved, justice has a way of becoming less urgent, so they'll get away with it, Iris said bitterly. Augustus may have paid the price, but the men who purchased those poor women will go unpunished. Perhaps not, came Eleanor's voice from beside the fire. She and her sister had approached silently, their expressions unnervingly adult in their childish faces. They all have names, Evelyn continued. Father kept records of everything. And we remember what we read, Eleanor added. We remember everything, they finished in unison. That night, as Iris lay awake in her room at the inn, a soft knocking came at her door. She opened it to find the twins standing in the hallway, each holding a small leather-bound book. What are these? Iris asked, ushering them inside. Father's real ledgers, Eleanor explained, placing her book on the small table. The ones he kept in the secret compartment behind Mother's portrait, Evelyn added. How did you? Iris began, then shook her head. Never mind. But these were in the house. The fire. We took them before, Eleanor said simply. The night before you came. We knew what would happen, Evelyn continued. We saw it in our dreams. Iris stared at them, a chill running through her that had nothing to do with the winter night. You knew? About the fire? About your parents? The twins nodded, their movements once again perfectly synchronized. The dead ladies showed us, Eleanor explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They needed our help, Evelyn added. They couldn't rest until justice was done. And now? Iris asked, almost afraid of the answer. Some of them have gone, Eleanor said, the ones Father kept beneath the house. But the others are still waiting, Evelyn continued. The ones who were taken away, they won't rest until all the men are punished, they said together, their voices blending into a single unsettling harmony. Iris looked down at the ledgers, understanding dawning. These contain the names of the men who bought those women, the twins nodded again. Every name, Eleanor confirmed. Every address, Evelyn added. Every detail, they finished together. Iris's mind raced. If what the twins said was true, these books contained evidence that could bring down some of the most powerful men in England. Lords, businessmen, perhaps even government officials. But would anyone believe them? Would anyone act on such information, especially coming from a disgraced family and a mere governess? What do you expect me to do with these? She asked finally. The twins exchanged their characteristic look, a silent communication passing between them. Keep them safe, Eleanor said. Until we're older, Evelyn continued. Until we can use them ourselves, they concluded in perfect unison. A memory rose in Iris's mind. The twins' words in the library. It ends tonight. No more girls will disappear from Blackmoor. Had they known even then how events would unfold? Had they somehow orchestrated it all? Looking at their solemn faces, illuminated by the dim lamplight, Iris was struck by the impossible thought that these children, these strange, unnaturally perceptive children, had set in motion the destruction of Blackmoor Estate and everyone connected to it. "The fire," she said slowly. "Did you—" "We didn't start it," Eleanor replied, her expression innocent. "The ladies did that," Evelyn explained. "We just showed them how," they added together. Outside, the wind howled across the moors, carrying with it the faint echo of women's voices, raised in a terrible harmony of justice long denied and now, at last, achieved. This second block develops the confrontation between Augustus and Vivian, reveals the fate of the previous maids, and shows the supernatural elements gaining strength. I've included the dramatic burning of Blackmoor Estate, the discovery of the buried victims, and the revelation that the twins may have orchestrated the entire sequence of events through their connection with the spirits. The narrative deepens the mystery while providing some answers, and sets up the final block with the revelation of the ledgers containing evidence against powerful men. From the personal journal of Iris Fleming, dated September 15, 1897. 10 years have passed since the night Blackmoor Estate burned to the ground, taking its secrets and sins with it, or so the world believes. The official inquest concluded that Augustus Ellsworth, facing financial ruin and the discovery of his crimes, had murdered his wife before setting fire to the house and perishing in the flames. The remains found beneath the kitchen floor were identified as the missing maids, victims of a desperate man's depravity. The case was considered closed, a tragic but isolated incident, best forgotten by respectable society. How convenient for those whose names filled Augustus's ledgers. How fortunate for the lords and businessmen who had purchased young women like cattle at a market. They attended the memorial service for the Ellsworths with appropriately solemn faces, offered condolences to the poor orphaned twins, and returned to their lives secure in the knowledge that their participation in such horrors would never come to light. They were wrong. I sit now in my modest home in London's Bloomsbury district, watching the twins, no longer children but young women of 21, prepare for the evening ahead. They remain identical in appearance, their raven hair now elegantly styled, their blue eyes still unnervingly perceptive. Yet time has accentuated subtle differences between them. Eleanor is the more analytical, Evelyn the more empathetic, though both possess a quiet determination that has served them well in the decades since Blackmoor. "Are you certain you wish to go through with this?" I ask, though I already know the answer. Once the twins set their minds to something, they are immovable. "It's time," Eleanor replies, adjusting her pearl earrings. "Lord Montague has evaded justice long enough." 10 years, Evelyn adds. 10 years of nightmares. 10 years of her voice in our dreams. I need not ask whose voice she means. Jane Collins, the last maid to disappear before my arrival at Blackmoor, the one who had shown kindness to the twins. According to the ledgers, she had been sold to Lord Montague, a prominent peer with estates in Yorkshire and London, a man whose reputation for charitable works concealed darker appetites. What if he doesn't confess? I press, my concern for them overriding my desire for justice. What if he calls your bluff? The twins exchange their characteristic look, that silent communication that has always existed between them. "He'll confess," Eleanor says with quiet certainty. "They always do," Evelyn adds. I cannot argue with their record. In the past 3 years, since they came of age and gained control of what remained of the Ellsworth fortune, surprisingly substantial once Augustus's hidden accounts were discovered, The twins have methodically worked their way through the names in their father's ledgers. One by one, the men who purchased women from Blackmoor have been confronted with their crimes. Some paid handsomely for silence. Others used their influence to secure positions or favors for the twins. A few attempted threats, only to find that the Ellsworth sisters possessed a power far more terrifying than mere blackmail. For the twins' abilities, their uncanny perceptions, their connection to those who had passed, had not diminished with age, but had grown stronger, more focused, more deliberate. The carriage will be here shortly, I note, checking the ornate clock on the mantel. Are you prepared for every contingency? Yes, Miss Fleming, they reply in unison, the formal address a private joke between us. I have been Iris to them for years now, ever since I became their legal guardian following the tragedy. Now I serve as their companion and confidant, the only living soul who knows the full extent of their plans and their powers. The invitation to Lord Montague's exclusive soirée had arrived a month ago after Eleanor had accidentally encountered his son at a gallery opening. The young man had been immediately captivated by her beauty and mysterious air, unaware that every word, every glance, every seeming coincidence had been carefully orchestrated. Remember, I say as the doorbell announces the arrival of our carriage, if anything seems amiss, we leave immediately. Your parents' fate need not be yours. Don't worry, Iris, Eleanor soothes, taking my hand. We're not planning a confrontation in public. Just a private conversation, Evelyn continues, after the other guests have departed. And we won't be alone, they add together, their voices blending in that unsettling harmony that still sends shivers down my spine. The Montague mansion in Belgravia is ablaze with light and music, the cream of London society in attendance. Lords and ladies, industrialists and politicians circulate through opulent rooms, their wealth on display in gleaming jewels and immaculate attire. If any of them recognize the Ellsworth twins, they give no sign. The scandal of Blackmoor is a distant memory, the name Ellsworth now associated only with the twins' carefully cultivated image as eccentric heiresses with a penchant for spiritualism, a fashionable interest in certain circles. Lord Montague himself greets us in the grand foyer, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the robust complexion of one who spends time outdoors. His handshake is firm, his smile practiced, but when his gaze falls upon the twins, something flickers in his eyes, a momentary uncertainty quickly masked. The Mrs. Ellsworth, I presume, he says, his voice betraying no tension. My son has spoken of nothing else since your meeting, Miss Eleanor. And this must be your sister, Evelyn. Indeed, Lord Montague, Eleanor replies with a perfect curtsy. Your son has been most attentive. We're honored to be included in such a distinguished gathering, Evelyn adds, her eyes sweeping the assembled guests. So many familiar names. Lord Montague's smile tightens, almost imperceptibly. Yes, well, one does try to maintain certain standards. And you must be Miss Fleming, the twins' companion? My son mentioned you would be accompanying them. I incline my head, noting how his gaze slides over me. Dismissive, as one might regard a servant or an elderly relative, someone of no consequence. How little he knows. Please enjoy yourselves, he continues, already turning to greet new arrivals. Champagne is being served in the East Salon, and there will be a musical performance at 10. We move through the crowd, the twins drawing admiring glances and whispered comments. Their beauty is undeniable, but there is something else about them that captures attention. An intensity, a presence that commands notice. I watch as they separate, Eleanor engaging Lord Montague's son in animated conversation, while Evelyn drifts toward a group of older gentlemen near the fireplace. I position myself where I can observe both of them, my role well rehearsed over years of similar gatherings. To the casual observer, I am merely a chaperone, ensuring propriety is maintained. In reality, I am their sentinel, their witness, and if necessary, their accomplice. The evening progresses according to plan. Eleanor captivates the young heir with her wit and charm, while Evelyn moves from group to group, dropping names and references that cause certain men to pale slightly or abruptly change the subject. By midnight, when most guests have departed, leaving only the inner circle of Lord Montague's closest friends, the atmosphere has shifted subtly, a current of unease running beneath the polished veneer of aristocratic indifference. Lord Montague. Eleanor approaches our host directly, her voice carrying in the now quieter room. My sister and I were hoping you might show us your renowned collection of antiquities. Your son mentioned it with such admiration. Montague hesitates, caught between social obligation and obvious reluctance. It's rather late, Miss Ellsworth. Perhaps another time. Oh, but we're leaving for the continent tomorrow, Evelyn interjects, appearing at her sister's side. It would be such a disappointment to miss this opportunity. The continent? One of the remaining guests, a portly baronet, asks with forced joviality. Where are you bound, if I may inquire? Vienna first, Eleanor replies. Then perhaps Prague. We have business there, Evelyn adds, relating to our father's affairs. The words hang in the air, innocent on the surface but laden with implication for those who understand their true meaning. I note how several men exchange glances, how Lord Montague's hand tightens around his brandy glass. Very well, he says after a moment. A brief tour then. Gentlemen, please continue enjoying yourselves. I shan't be long. As the twins follow Lord Montague from the room, I make to accompany them, but Eleanor catches my eye with a subtle shake of her head. This part of the plan, it seems, has changed. I am to remain behind, perhaps as insurance should anything go awry. In their absence, an uncomfortable silence descends upon the remaining guests. The baronet attempts to revive the conversation with a comment about the weather, but his words fall flat. These men know each other too well, share too many secrets, to maintain the pretense of casual sociability now that the twins have departed. Remarkable young women, the Ellsworth girls, one man observes, his tone carefully neutral. One would never guess the tragedy in their background. Quite, another agrees, though I've heard concerning things about their interests. Spiritualism, you mean? The baronet asks. Harmless nonsense, surely. Perhaps, the second man replies. Though they claim to communicate with the dead. One wonders what tales the dead might tell, if such things were possible. The implication silences the room once more. I sip my sherry, watching the clock tick past 1, then half past. Just as I begin to worry, the door opens and the twins return. Alone. Lord Montague sends his apologies. Eleanor announces to the room he's been taken ill and has retired for the evening. Nothing serious, I hope? The baronet inquires, rising to his feet. A sudden indisposition, Evelyn explains smoothly. His man is attending to him. Perhaps we should look in on him, one of the other men suggests, his expression concerned. He was most insistent on not being disturbed, Eleanor counters. In fact, he asks that we convey his wishes that the gathering conclude for the night. The guests exchange glances, skeptical, worried, but ultimately unwilling to challenge the twins directly. One by one they make their excuses and depart, until only we three remain in the grand salon. What happened? I ask, once the last footsteps have faded. The twins exchange their look, a conversation without words. Lord Montague has made a full confession, Eleanor says simply. In writing, Evelyn adds, patting her reticule where a folded document is concealed. But how did you? I begin, then stop myself. There are aspects of the twins' methods I have learned not to question too closely. Was he alone when you left him? Not entirely, they reply in unison, a familiar chill entering their voices. We depart the Montague mansion without further incident, our carriage rolling through the quiet streets of nighttime London. The twins sit side by side, their expressions serene in the intermittent glow of passing street lamps. That's the last of them, Eleanor observes after a long silence. The last name in father's ledger. The last of the men who bought women from Blackmoor, Evelyn clarifies. I consider their words, turning them over in my mind. What of the women themselves? I ask finally. Those who were taken away, not kept beneath the house. Are they truly at peace now? The twins look at each other, then out into the darkness beyond the carriage windows. Jane is, Eleanor says softly. She appeared to Lord Montague tonight, showed him what became of her. That's why he confessed so readily, Evelyn explains, why they all did in the end. And the others? I press. Some have found peace, Eleanor continues. Others still wander, still search, Evelyn adds. For what? I ask, though part of me dreads the answer. For home, they reply together. For justice, for someone to remember their names. The carriage falls silent again, save for the rhythmic clop of hooves and rattle of wheels over cobblestones. I think of the names scratched into the wall of that room in Blackmoor's north wing, of the charred remains found beneath the kitchen floor, of the women who were taken away, their fates known only to the men who purchased them, and to the twins. What will you do now? I ask eventually. Now that your list is complete? The question has been haunting me for months. For 10 years, the twins have been driven by a single purpose, to bring to account every man named in their father's ledgers. With that task accomplished, what path will they choose? We've been considering that, Eleanor says, her gaze still fixed on the darkness outside. We thought perhaps we might travel, Evelyn continues, not just to Vienna or Prague. Further, they say together. America, perhaps, or India. There are others like us, Eleanor explains, turning back to me. People who can hear what most cannot. People who can see what most cannot, Evelyn adds. And there are always those who need justice, they finish in unison. I nod slowly, understanding dawning. Their work is not complete, it has merely changed focus. No longer bound by the names in Augustus's ledgers, they are now free to pursue a broader mission, guided by their unique abilities and their unyielding sense of justice. And you, Iris? Eleanor asks, reaching for my hand. Will you come with us? I hesitate, considering the question. I am no longer the frightened young woman who arrived at Blackmoor a decade ago, desperate for employment. The experiences I have shared with the twins have changed me, opened my eyes to realities most people never glimpse, and yet I have never possessed their abilities, their connection to the unseen world. I have been their guardian, their companion, their accomplice, but always at a remove from the powers they wield so naturally. I don't know if I would be of use to you in such endeavors, I admit finally. You underestimate yourself, Evelyn says gently. You always have. You see things we don't, Eleanor continues. You understand people in ways we cannot. We need you, they say together, their voices blending into that strange harmony that still, after all these years, sends a shiver down my spine. We always will. From The Strange Case of the Ellsworth Twins, published in the Strand magazine, October 1905. The story of the Ellsworth twins and their mysterious companion, Iris Fleming, has passed into legend in certain circles, following the scandal at Lord Montague's London residence in 1897, when the peer was found in his study, apparently having penned a detailed confession to abhorrent crimes before taking his own life. The trio disappeared from English society. Rumors placed them in various locations over the subsequent years. Vienna, where they reportedly exposed a ring of art forgers with connections to the Habsburg court. Prague, where they were consulted in the case of a haunted monastery. Even as far afield as Boston, where they became involved in the mysterious disappearance of 3 young women from prominent families. What truth lies behind these tales is difficult to ascertain. What can be verified is that wherever the Ellsworth twins traveled, they left in their wake a trail of exposed secrets, righted wrongs, and powerful men suddenly eager to make amends for past transgressions. Most curious of all are the consistent reports from those who encountered them. Claims that the twins could communicate with the dead, could know things no living person could possibly know. Such assertions would normally be dismissed as superstitious nonsense, were it not for the number and credibility of those making them. Judge Henderson of the Massachusetts Supreme Court, a man known for his rational mind and skepticism towards spiritual matters, wrote in his private correspondence, "The Ellsworth women revealed details of my father's business dealings that were known to no living soul save myself. When pressed on how they came by such information, they simply replied that my father had told them directly, a claim I would dismiss as absurd had they not then proceeded to describe in perfect detail the unique watch fob he always carried, an item mentioned in no public record and visible in no photograph." Similar testimonies exist from respected individuals across Europe and America, all describing encounters with the twins that defied rational explanation. And always present was Miss Fleming, the quiet, watchful companion whose role in their strange activities remains perhaps the greatest mystery of all. The last confirmed sighting of the trio was in New Orleans in 1902, where they were reportedly investigating the sudden deaths of several young women connected to a prominent Louisiana family. After that, they vanish from the historical record entirely. What became of the Ellsworth twins and Iris Fleming? Did they continue their peculiar crusade for justice, or did they perhaps fall victim to one of the many powerful enemies they had made over the years? Or is there truth to the whispered rumor that circulates among those with an interest in such matters, that they retreat periodically to a remote location, aging not at all between appearances, emerging only when called upon by those spirits who cannot rest until justice is done? One final detail may be worth noting. In each location where the Ellsworths were reported to have pursued one of their investigations, local residents described the same curious phenomenon. In the dead of night, when the wind is high and the moon obscured, women's voices can sometimes be heard, raised in a strange harmony that is at once beautiful and terrifying. A chorus of the wronged, the forgotten, the unavenged, calling out across the barrier between life and death. Is it merely legend, the kind of superstitious tale that inevitably attaches itself to unusual individuals? Perhaps. Yet those who have heard these voices speak of the experience with such conviction, such genuine fear, that one hesitates to dismiss their accounts entirely. And so the question remains, tantalizing in its implications. If the dead can speak, what secrets might they tell? What injustices might they reveal? And who among the living would be brave enough or foolish enough to listen? Author's note. This article was found among the personal effects of journalist Arthur Campbell following his unexplained disappearance in 1905, shortly after submitting the manuscript to his editor. It was never published. The current whereabouts of Eleanor and Evelyn Ellsworth and their companion Iris Fleming remain unknown. This final block concludes the narrative by jumping forward in time, showing how the twins and Iris have continued their pursuit of justice over the years. I've included the journal entry from Iris and the fictional article from the Strand magazine to give different perspectives on the story's aftermath. The ending maintains the supernatural mystery while suggesting that the twins and Iris have continued their work well beyond the original events at Blackmoor Estate, bringing justice to the wronged and giving voice to the forgotten.